Beneath the Giza Plateau, more than half a mile straight down, 8 spiral shafts descend into the earth. Perfect helical coils wrapped around central columns, geometry that cannot exist in nature. And at the bottom, 2 chambers larger than most sports arenas, sealed in darkness for longer than recorded history. The pyramids are not monuments, they are capstones, the tip of something so vast that the structures we have marveled at for centuries are merely the roof. In the next 2 hours, you will see the satellite data. You will understand the technology that made this discovery possible. You will learn why the scientific establishment is fighting to suppress these findings, and you will discover how ancient myths about hidden halls beneath Egypt match what modern instruments have just revealed. The descent into the greatest archaeological mystery of our time begins now. The signal that changed everything. Before we begin, like and subscribe if this calm, science-driven format resonates with you. Use the hype button if it is available. In the comments, note your location, your current time, and the key question this topic triggers for you. I will address the strongest questions in comments or in a later video. There is a moment in every great discovery when the world splits in two. There is the world before the data arrived, and the world after. We do not always recognize these moments when they happen. They slip past us disguised as ordinary days, ordinary conversations, ordinary interviews on ordinary podcasts. And then weeks or months or years later, we look back and realize that everything changed in that single hour. That single sentence, that single image, rendered from numbers we did not yet know how to interpret. December the 7th, 2025, may prove to be one of those moments. On that day, an Italian radar engineer named Filippo Biondi sat down for a nearly 2-hour conversation with Jesse Michaels on the American Alchemy podcast. The topic was the Giza Plateau, the pyramids, the Sphinx, structures that humanity has gazed upon for millennia, structures we believed we understood, at least in their broad outlines. Tombs for pharaohs, monuments to ego and eternity, stone piled upon stone by tens of thousands of workers under the brutal Egyptian sun. But Biondi did not come to talk about what sits above the sand. He came to talk about what lies beneath it, and what he revealed, calmly, methodically, with the precision of a scientist who knows his data is about to change everything, was this. The pyramids of Giza are not what we think they are. They are not the main structure. They are not even close to the main structure. The pyramids, those iconic monuments that have defined our understanding of ancient Egypt for centuries, may be nothing more than capstones, markers, the visible tip of something so vast, so deep, so geometrically impossible that our current models of ancient civilization cannot account for it. Beneath the Khafra Pyramid, the second largest of the 3 Great Pyramids, Biondi and his team detected 8 massive hollow cylinders plunging straight down into the earth. Each cylinder contains a central column wrapped in perfect helical coils, spiraling downward like the threads of a screw or the grooves of a drill bit frozen in stone. These shafts do not stop at 10 meters. They do not stop at 50 meters. They do not stop at 100 meters. They descend more than 1 kilometer into the bedrock, 3,500 feet, more than half a mile straight down. And at the bottom, where these 8 spiraling shafts converge, sit 2 enormous cubic chambers. Each one measures approximately 260 feet on every side. That is larger than most sports arenas. That is larger than many city blocks. That is a volume of enclosed space that dwarfs anything we have ever associated with ancient Egyptian construction. Think about that for a moment. We have spent centuries marveling at the Great Pyramid, at its 2.3 million stone blocks, at its nearly 500-foot height, at the precision of its angles, and the mystery of its internal chambers. And now we're being told that directly beneath these monuments, invisible to every tourist, every archaeologist, every satellite photograph, there exists a structure that makes the visible pyramids look like decorative flourishes on the roof of a cathedral we never knew existed. The pyramids are just the tip of the iceberg, Biondi said during the interview. They are merely a capstone to something much larger beneath the surface. The real structure is below. Now, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This is the foundation of scientific skepticism, and it is a principle that has protected us from countless frauds and fantasies over the centuries. Anyone can claim to have found something remarkable beneath the sands of Egypt, The history of Egyptology is littered with sensational announcements that evaporated under scrutiny. But Biondi brought something to this conversation that most claimants do not bring. He brought redundancy. 4 separate satellite systems, operated by 4 different companies, using 4 independent data collection methods, all returned the same results: Umbra, Capella Space, ICI, and Italy's Cosmo SkyMed constellation. These are not fringe operations. These are not amateur enthusiasts with homemade equipment. These are commercial and governmental satellite operators whose technology is used for everything from agricultural monitoring to military reconnaissance to infrastructure assessment. All 4 satellites gave exactly the same results, Biondi told Michaels. That is really amazing. We cannot announce anything without these basic scientific methods. This is crucial. In science, replication is everything. A single observation, no matter how striking, can be an error, an artifact of the equipment, a misinterpretation of the data, a fluke of atmospheric conditions or processing algorithms. But when 4 independent systems designed by different engineers, launched by different organizations, analyzing data collected on different days, all converge on the same conclusion, the probability of error drops dramatically. The structures beneath Giza are not a ghost in the machine. They appear on every scan. But how is this possible? How can satellites orbiting hundreds of miles above the Earth detect structures buried more than half a mile beneath it? This is where Biondi's work becomes genuinely revolutionary, and where we must pause to understand the technology that made this discovery possible. Traditional radar, the kind used in weather stations and air traffic control, sends out pulses of electromagnetic energy and measures what bounces back. This works beautifully for detecting aircraft or storm systems, but it fails completely when you try to look underground. Soil absorbs radar. Rock absorbs radar. The electromagnetic waves simply cannot penetrate more than a few meters into solid material before they dissipate entirely. This is why Zahi Hawass, the former Egyptian Minister of Antiquities, immediately dismissed Biondi's claims as fake news. Radar cannot penetrate to such depths, Hawass argued. The techniques employed are neither scientifically approved nor validated. And if Biondi were using traditional radar, Hawass would be absolutely correct. But Biondi is not using traditional radar. He developed something called synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography, and it operates on an entirely different principle. Instead of trying to push electromagnetic waves through solid rock, this technique listens to the rock itself. It detects microscopic vibrations on the surface, tiny movements caused by background seismic activity, by the constant low-frequency hum of the planet, by the acoustic energy that propagates through stone the way sound propagates through air. Everything vibrates. The ground beneath your feet is vibrating right now, at frequencies too low and amplitudes too small for your senses to detect, but vibrating nonetheless. These vibrations are influenced by what lies beneath them. A solid, homogeneous mass of rock vibrates differently than a hollow chamber. A vertical shaft filled with air vibrates differently than the surrounding limestone. The geometry of underground structures leaves an acoustic fingerprint on the surface movements above them. Biondi's genius was recognizing that satellite radar, though it cannot penetrate the ground, can detect these surface vibrations with extraordinary precision. The Doppler effect, the same phenomenon that makes an ambulance siren change pitch as it passes you, allows radar systems to measure velocity. And if you can measure the velocity of microscopic surface movements over time, you can begin to reconstruct what underground structures are causing those movements. The Earth itself becomes the sensor. This is not speculative physics. This is not theoretical hand-waving. Biondi has published peer-reviewed research on this methodology, dating back to 2022. His work appeared on our Archive, the preprint server where physicists and engineers share their findings before formal journal publication. The mathematics are public. The algorithms are documented. The technique has been validated in controlled settings, which brings us to the proof that may ultimately silence the skeptics. Before turning his technology on the pyramids, Biondi conducted what scientists call a blind test. He aimed his satellite analysis at a location where the underground structures were already known with absolute certainty, a place where humans had built something deep beneath the surface, measured it precisely, and documented every dimension. He chose the Gran Sasso National Laboratory in Italy. This is the largest underground physics laboratory in the world, a facility carved into the heart of a mountain in the Apennines, 125 miles from where Biondi processed his satellite data. The laboratory sits beneath more than a kilometre of solid rock, which shields its sensitive experiments from cosmic radiation. Its dimensions are precisely known. Its location is precisely mapped. If Biondi's technique was real, it would find the laboratory exactly where it should be. If the technique was flawed, the data would show nothing, or worse, show structures that did not exist. The measurements matched reality with 100% precision. We did measurements of the Gran Sasso d'Italia Physics Laboratory, Biondi explained. Our measurements and the reality match 100%. This is the moment when skepticism must evolve into something else. Not blind acceptance, but genuine scientific curiosity. A technology that can accurately map a known underground facility through a kilometre of mountain rock deserves serious consideration when it reports unknown structures beneath the sands of Giza. The burden of proof has shifted. It is no longer enough to simply dismiss the findings because they conflict with established narratives, and yet the findings do conflict with established narratives. Dramatically, almost incomprehensibly. The structures Biondi detected are not small anomalies, not hidden chambers of the sort that Mune tomography found inside the Great Pyramid a few years ago. Those discoveries, while exciting, fit within our existing framework. A void here, an unexplored passage there. Secrets, yes, but secrets that the pyramid could plausibly contain. What Biondi is describing does not fit any existing framework. 8 spiralling shafts descending more than 3,000 feet. Perfect helical geometry that cannot occur naturally. Cubic chambers larger than aircraft hangars at depths that would have been utterly impossible for ancient engineers using any technology we currently attribute to them. 100% man-made, Biondi stated when asked if these could be natural geological formations. You do not find perfect coils like this in geology, and here is where the mystery deepens beyond the merely archaeological. Because the spiral signature that appears beneath the Khafra pyramid does not appear only there. The same geometric pattern, the same helical structures, the same apparent engineering shows up in the scans of other locations across the Giza Plateau and beyond. Beneath the Menkaure pyramid, the smallest of the 3 great pyramids, similar structures appear at a smaller scale. Beneath the Great Sphinx, that enigmatic lion-bodied guardian that has watched over the plateau for millennia, the scans reveal what appears to be a single massive shaft plunging into the earth. And 30 miles away, at a site called Hawara, where ancient historians once described a labyrinth that surpassed even the pyramids, in grandeur the same signatures emerge from the data. Whatever was built beneath Giza was not built in isolation. It was part of a network, a system, a design whose full extent we are only beginning to glimpse through instruments that see what human eyes never could. The old debris-filled shafts between the Sphinx and Khafra show up in the scans as direct access routes into the deeper complex. These are not theoretical entry points. These are physical passages, currently blocked by centuries of accumulated rubble, that appear to connect the surface monuments to whatever vast machinery or architecture waits below. Biondi's team has already submitted a formal proposal to Egyptian authorities. If approved, physical exploration could begin in 2026. For the first time in modern history, we may be able to descend into structures that have remained sealed since before recorded memory began. But approval is far from guaranteed. The Egyptian Antiquities Establishment has spent decades defending a particular narrative about the pyramids, a narrative that these findings threaten to demolish entirely. Careers have been built on that narrative. Reputations rest upon it. And the man who has defended it most fiercely, Zahi Hawass, has already declared war on these claims before any excavation can test them. The battle lines are drawn. On one side, data from 4 satellites and a technology validated against known underground structures. On the other, an academic establishment that insists such findings are impossible. And somewhere beneath the sands of Giza, in darkness that has not seen light for thousands of years or perhaps far longer, the truth waits, listening to the Earth's heartbeat. To understand what Filippo Biondi discovered beneath the Giza Plateau, we must first understand the technology that made such a discovery possible. And to understand that technology, we must abandon some of our intuitions about how we perceive the world beneath our feet. When most people think of radar, they imagine beams of energy shooting through the air, bouncing off distant objects, and returning with information about what lies ahead. This is essentially correct. Radar, which stands for radio detection and ranging, works by emitting pulses of electromagnetic radiation and measuring what reflects back. The time delay tells us distance. The Doppler shift tells us velocity. The strength of the return tells us something about the size and composition of the target. This principle revolutionized warfare in the 20th century. It gave us the ability to detect incoming aircraft from hundreds of miles away. It allowed ships to navigate through fog and darkness. It enabled weather forecasters to track storms with precision that would have seemed magical to earlier generations. Radar sees what eyes cannot. But radar has a fundamental limitation. It cannot see through solid material. The electromagnetic waves that radar systems emit penetrate the air with ease because air is largely empty space at the molecular level. But when those waves encounter dense matter, soil, rock, concrete, metal, they are absorbed or reflected almost immediately. Ground-penetrating radar, a specialized variant designed for archaeological and geological work, can sometimes image structures a few meters below the surface, but only under ideal conditions. Dry sand is relatively transparent. Wet clay is nearly opaque. Solid limestone, the kind that forms the bedrock of the Giza Plateau, stops radar cold within the first meter or two. This is why Zahi Hawass dismissed Biondi's claims with such confidence. If you understand conventional radar physics, the idea of imaging structures more than a kilometer underground seems not just unlikely, but physically impossible. The electromagnetic wave simply cannot travel that far through rock. The energy dissipates. The signal dies. By the time you reach depths of 50 meters, let alone 500 or 1,000, there is nothing left to measure. And yet Biondi's technique works. The key insight is that Biondi is not trying to send radar waves through the rock. He is not trying to make limestone transparent. He is doing something far more subtle and far more ingenious. He is using radar to listen to the rock itself. Consider for a moment what the Earth actually is beneath your feet. We tend to think of the ground as static, as motionless, as the very definition of stability. Solid as a rock, we say. Firm ground. Terra firma. But this perception is an illusion created by the limitations of human senses. In reality, the ground is constantly moving. Seismic activity ripples through the planet every second of every day. Earthquakes in Chile send waves through the Earth's interior that can be detected in Norway. Ocean waves crashing against distant coastlines generate microseismic noise that propagates through continental crust. Human activity, traffic, construction, industrial machinery creates vibrations that travel for miles through stone. Even the moon's gravitational pull flexes the solid Earth by centimeters, creating tidal movements in rock that we cannot feel but instruments can measure. The Earth hums, it vibrates, it oscillates at frequencies ranging from the very low, cycles lasting minutes or hours, to the relatively high, dozens of cycles per second. This constant movement is usually ignored because it is so small, measured in micrometers or less, and because it seems like meaningless noise rather than useful signal. Biondi realized that this noise is not meaningless at all, it is information. When seismic energy propagates through the ground, it does not travel uniformly. It interacts with whatever structures lie in its path. A homogeneous mass of solid rock transmits vibrations differently than rock containing voids. A vertical shaft filled with air responds to acoustic energy differently than the surrounding limestone. The geometry of underground chambers creates patterns of resonance and interference that affect how the surface above them moves. Imagine dropping a pebble into a pond. The ripples spread outward in concentric circles, uniform and predictable in still water. But now imagine that beneath the surface of that pond, invisible to your eye, there is a complex arrangement of objects. Submerged rocks, hollow tubes, curved surfaces. Each of these objects would interact with the passing ripples, reflecting some energy, refracting some energy, creating interference patterns that distort the neat concentric circles into something more complex. If you could measure those surface ripples with enough precision, if you could map exactly how they deviated from the simple pattern you would expect in an empty pond, you could begin to reconstruct what objects must be causing those deviations. You would not need to see through the water. You would not need to send any energy downward at all. You would only need to observe the surface with sufficient accuracy and work backward from the effects to the causes. This is precisely what synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography does with the Earth. Satellites orbiting several hundred kilometers above the planet emit radar pulses toward the ground. These pulses reflect off the surface, and by measuring the precise timing and frequency shift of the returns, the satellite can detect surface movements with astounding precision. Modern SAR systems can measure displacements of millimeters or less. They can track how a building settles over months. They can detect the subtle inflation of a volcano before eruption. They can monitor the stability of bridges and dams from space. Biondi's innovation was applying the sensitivity to the problem of subsurface imaging. By collecting SAR data over the same location repeatedly, over days and weeks and months, his algorithms can identify patterns in the surface micromovements. These patterns are not random. They are shaped by whatever structures exist beneath the surface. The mathematics of inverting this relationship, of working backward from observed surface movement to implied underground geometry, is complex, but it is not magic. It is physics, applied with extraordinary care and computational power. The Earth itself becomes the sensor, Biondi explained. We are not penetrating the ground with our radar. We are listening to what the ground tells us about itself. This concept has profound implications. Traditional archaeology requires excavation. You must dig to discover. You must move tons of soil and stone to reveal what lies beneath. This is slow, expensive, and destructive. Once you excavate a site, you cannot unexcavate it. The context is lost forever. And in politically sensitive locations like the Giza Plateau, permission to dig is nearly impossible to obtain. But Biondi's technique requires no excavation at all. The satellites pass overhead, the data streams down, the algorithms process, and images of underground structures emerge without disturbing a single grain of sand. This is archaeology from orbit. This is seeing the invisible without touching it. Of course, seeing is not the same as understanding. When the first images of the structures beneath Khafra's pyramid emerged from Biondi's computers, they did not come with labels and explanations. They showed geometry. They showed density variations. They showed the unmistakable signatures of void spaces and solid material arranged in patterns that demanded interpretation. And those patterns were strange. 8 cylindrical shafts descending vertically from the base of the pyramid. This alone would be remarkable, would suggest engineering on a scale we have never attributed to ancient Egypt. But the shafts were not simple cylinders. Each one contained internal structure, a central column running down the axis, and wrapped around that column, in perfect helical geometry, coiled elements that spiraled downward like the threads of a screw. Think about what a helix is. It is one of the most fundamental shapes in nature and in engineering. DNA coils in a double helix. Proteins fold into helical structures. Screws and bolts use helical threads to convert rotational motion into linear force. Spiral staircases allow efficient vertical movement in a compact footprint. Electrical inductors wrap wire in helical coils to create magnetic fields. The helix appears everywhere that nature or technology requires the elegant combination of circular and linear motion. But helices do not appear by accident in geology. Limestone does not naturally form into perfect coiled structures. Erosion does not carve spiraling shafts into bedrock. No known geological process produces the geometry that Biondi's scans revealed beneath Giza. This is why he stated with such certainty that the structures are 100% man-made. You do not find perfect coils like this in geology. The question then becomes not whether these structures are artificial, but who made them and for what purpose. Traditional Egyptology offers no answers here. The ancient Egyptians, as we understand them, were sophisticated builders capable of remarkable achievements, but their engineering was fundamentally based on mass. They moved stone, they stacked stone, they carved stone. They did not, according to any evidence we possess, bore kilometre-deep shafts with helical internal geometry. They did not construct cubic chambers the size of aircraft hangars, hundreds of metres underground. They did not create structures that would challenge modern tunnelling technology, and yet the structures exist. 4 satellites confirm they exist. The same mathematical signatures appear in every data set. Whatever paradigm we use to interpret ancient Egypt must now account for these findings, or it must explain why 4 independent satellite systems all produce the same false positive, a coincidence so unlikely as to border on the miraculous. The resonance implications add another layer of mystery. Biondi has speculated cautiously about what function these helical structures might serve. In modern engineering, coiled geometries are often associated with energy storage and transfer. Springs store mechanical energy. Inductors store magnetic energy. Resonant coils amplify specific frequencies while dampening others. If the underground structures at Giza were designed to interact with vibrations, with the constant seismic energy flowing through the earth, then the helical geometry makes a kind of functional sense. Coils wrapped around central columns, descending for hundreds of meters through solid rock, would create a vast acoustic instrument. The pyramids above, with their precise geometry and massive stone construction, might serve as the visible portion of this instrument, tuned resonators sitting atop a machine that extends far deeper than anyone imagined. This interpretation verges into territory that mainstream science finds uncomfortable. It suggests purpose where we prefer to see accident. It implies sophisticated understanding of physics where we prefer to see primitive superstition. It raises the possibility that ancient builders knew things we have only recently rediscovered, and perhaps knew things we have not yet figured out. But the data does not care about our comfort. The data shows what the data shows: perfect helical coils, kilometre-deep shafts, cubic chambers of enormous size. Either the data is wrong, and somehow 4 independent satellite systems all made the same unlikely error, or the data is right, and we must revise our understanding of what lies beneath the sands of Egypt. The technique that revealed these structures continues to improve. When Biondi first began processing Cosmosky-Med data over Giza in the early 2020s, the resolution was limited. The images were suggestive but not definitive. Each year, as more data accumulated and algorithms improved, the clarity increased. What began as blurry anomalies sharpened into distinct geometric forms. What seemed like possible voids revealed themselves as precisely engineered shafts, and the depth estimates grew more extreme with each refinement. Initial analyses suggested structures extending perhaps 100 meters down, then 200, then 500. The current estimates, based on the most recent data processed through the most sophisticated algorithms, indicate depths exceeding 1,000 meters. This is more than half a mile straight down. This is deeper than many modern mines. This is a vertical distance so great that temperature begins to increase noticeably from geothermal heat. Whatever is down there, whoever built it, they were operating on a scale that defies easy explanation. The listening continues. Every day, satellites pass over the Giza Plateau. Every pass collects more data. Every byte feeds into algorithms that grow more refined with each iteration. The picture beneath the pyramids becomes clearer, and the questions become more pressing. What kind of civilization builds a kilometre underground? What did they know that we have forgotten? What might we find if we actually descend into those spiralling shafts? The Earth has been answering these questions all along, vibrating its secrets into the thin skin of rock we walk upon. We simply lack the instruments to listen. Now we have them. And what we're hearing is a story far stranger than we ever expected. 8 spirals into darkness. Let us descend now in imagination, into the structures that Filippo Biondi's satellites have revealed. Let us follow the data downward from the base of the Khafra pyramid into territory no human eye has seen in recorded history, and perhaps no human eye has ever seen. The Khafra pyramid stands 471 feet tall, the second largest of the 3 great pyramids that dominate the Giza Plateau. To tourists approaching from Cairo, it often appears taller than its neighbour, the Great Pyramid of Khufu, because it sits on higher ground and retains some of its original limestone casing at the peak. For thousands of years, we believed we knew what lay beneath this monument: bedrock. Perhaps some foundation chambers, perhaps some exploratory tunnels carved by ancient builders seeking suitable stone. We were wrong. According to the seismography data, the visible pyramid is not a structure sitting on the ground. It is a structure sitting on top of 8 vertical shafts that plunge into the earth like the roots of an impossible tree. These shafts begin at or near the base of the pyramid and descend with relentless geometric precision straight down through limestone bedrock that formed millions of years ago. 8 shafts. Not 7, not 9, but 8, arranged in a pattern that suggests deliberate design rather than random chance. 8 is a number that appears repeatedly in sacred geometry and ancient symbolism: the octagon, the 8-pointed star, the 8 trigrams of the I Ching, the Noble Eightfold Path of Buddhism. Whether this numerical choice has meaning or is merely coincidence, the precision of the arrangement leaves little doubt that it was intentional. Each shaft is not a simple hole in the rock. Each one is a complex structure in itself. The scans reveal hollow cylindrical volumes with central columns running down their axis, and wrapped around those central columns, in formations that Biondi describes as perfect helical coils, are structures that spiral downward into the darkness below. Picture a lighthouse with a spiral staircase winding around a central support column. Now imagine that lighthouse is inverted, pointing down into the earth instead of up into the sky. Now imagine 8 of them, arranged around the base of a pyramid, each one descending more than 3,000 feet into the bedrock. This is what the satellites see. The helical coils are perhaps the most enigmatic feature of these structures. A helix is a three-dimensional curve that maintains a constant angle to its central axis while advancing along that axis. Think of a spring. Think of a corkscrew. Think of the spiral binding on a notebook. The mathematics of a helix are elegant and precise. The geometry requires intention. You cannot accidentally create a helix. You cannot erosionally carve a helix. You cannot geologically precipitate a helix. Biondi addressed this directly when questioned about natural explanations. 100% man-made, he said. You do not find perfect coils like this in geology. The perfection he references is visible in the data. These are not approximate spirals, not vaguely coiled formations that might be mistaken for natural features if you squint hard enough. These are geometrically precise helices that maintain their angular relationship to the central column throughout their descent. The kind of precision that implies measurement, calculation, engineering, and the scale of this engineering staggers the mind. 3,500 feet, more than 1 kilometre. If you laid this distance horizontally, you could walk it in perhaps 15 minutes at a normal pace. But vertical distance is not like horizontal distance. Vertical distance fights gravity with every inch. Vertical distance requires support against collapse. Vertical distance into solid rock requires excavation of material that has nowhere easy to go. Consider what it would take to drill a shaft 1 kilometre deep today, with modern technology. We have tunnel boring machines that can chew through rock at rates of dozens of meters per day. We have diamond-tipped drill bits and hydraulic excavators and sophisticated ventilation systems and electric lighting and computerized monitoring. And still, deep underground construction is one of the most challenging engineering tasks we undertake. Subway tunnels regularly run over budget and behind schedule. Mining operations calculate profitability based partly on how deep they must go. Every additional meter of depth adds cost and complexity. The deepest mine in the world, the Mponeng gold mine in South Africa, reaches depths of about 4 kilometers. But Mponeng is a sprawling complex with multiple shafts, decades of development, billions of dollars of investment, and industrial infrastructure that would be visible from space. The shafts beneath Giza are single vertical structures, 8 of them, each more than a kilometer deep, with no surface infrastructure visible, no spoil piles of excavated rock, no evidence of the massive engineering effort that would have been required to create them. Unless, of course, that evidence has been hidden by time. Unless the surface traces have been buried by sand and erased by millennia. Unless we have been walking over the entrances to these structures for centuries without recognizing them for what they are. The debris-filled shafts between the Sphinx and the Khafra Pyramid show up in the scans as direct access routes into the deeper complex. This detail from Biondi's interview hints at how exploration might eventually proceed. The shafts are not pristine open passages waiting to be descended. They are filled with rubble, with sand, with the accumulated detritus of ages. But they exist. They connect the surface to the depths, and with sufficient excavation, they could potentially be cleared. What would we find if we cleared them? The scans suggest that the 8 helical shafts converge as they descend. Like the roots of a tree spreading out near the surface but joining into a trunk below, these shafts approach each other as they go deeper, and at their convergence point, more than 1,000 meters beneath the pyramid, they meet at 2 enormous cubic chambers. A cube is perhaps the simplest 3-dimensional geometric form. 6 square faces, 12 edges, 8 vertices, perfect symmetry in 3 dimensions. In sacred geometry, the cube represents the earth element, stability, foundation, the material world. It is also one of the 5 Platonic solids, shapes that fascinated ancient Greek mathematicians because of their perfect regularity. Each of the cubic chambers beneath Khafra measures approximately 260 feet on a side. Let that dimension settle in your mind. 260 feet is nearly the length of a football field. 260 feet cubed is a volume of over 17 million cubic feet. If these chambers exist, if the satellite data is accurate, then hidden beneath the Egyptian sand are enclosed spaces larger than most buildings on the surface of the earth. The Great Pyramid's King's Chamber, which has awed visitors for millennia, measures approximately 34 feet by 17 feet by 19 feet. It is considered one of the most remarkable interior spaces in ancient architecture. The chambers that Biondi's scans suggest exist beneath Giza are roughly 100 times larger by volume. What could such chambers contain? What purpose could they serve? Why would anyone build them so deep, so large, so far from light and air and the living world above? We do not know. The satellites can show us that something exists, but they cannot show us what that something is. The density variations that indicate void versus solid cannot tell us whether those voids contain artifacts or atmosphere or water, or something else entirely. The geometry reveals design but not purpose. The scale reveals ambition but not meaning. Speculation naturally fills the vacuum of knowledge. Some researchers have suggested that the helical structures might be related to energy generation or transmission. Coils wrapped around columns evoke images of electrical transformers, of magnetic flux, of the careful management of invisible forces. Others have proposed that the chambers might be repositories, storage facilities for objects or information deemed too precious or too dangerous to leave on the surface. Still others wonder whether the entire complex might have served some ritual or spiritual function we can barely imagine, a physical manifestation of cosmological beliefs we have not yet deciphered. Biondi himself has been cautious about interpretation. He is a radar engineer, not an archaeologist or a historian. His expertise lies in detecting structures, not in explaining them. But he has allowed himself some speculation about the helical geometry. These structures might be related to information, he suggested. Information and energy. The precision of the coils, the depth of the shafts, the convergence at the massive chambers below, all of it points towards some kind of functional purpose beyond mere burial or monument. Information is everything, he said. This cryptic phrase echoes through the mystery of what lies beneath Giza. In our modern world, we store information in magnetic patterns on hard drives, in optical patterns on disks, in electrical charges in solid-state memory. But there are other ways to encode information. DNA uses molecular patterns, crystals use atomic arrangements, and some theorists have proposed that information might be encoded in quantum states, in the fundamental fabric of space-time itself. Could the structures beneath Giza encode information in their geometry? Could the helical coils be a form of storage medium we do not yet understand? Could the kilometre-deep shafts serve as conduits for signals we have not yet learned to receive? These questions push against the boundaries of scientific conservatism. They venture into territory where evidence thins and imagination takes over. And yet the questions arise naturally from the data. 8 spiral shafts descending to enormous chambers is not a random formation. It is not a natural feature misinterpreted by over-eager researchers. It is either the most elaborate hoax in the history of satellite imaging, perpetrated simultaneously by 4 independent space agencies, or it is a genuine archaeological anomaly that demands explanation. The world above the chambers knows nothing of their existence. Tourists photograph the pyramids every day, stand on the stones that cap these impossible depths, and return home with no inkling of what might lie beneath their feet. Egyptologists give lectures about burial practices and pharaonic dynasties without mentioning the possibility that everything they describe is merely the visible portion of something far more extensive. But the data exists now. It has been shared publicly on podcasts and in interviews. The scientific papers documenting the methodology are available on preprint servers. The images, crude as they may be compared to what direct exploration might reveal, are circulating through channels that establishment gatekeepers cannot control. The spiral shafts beneath Khafra no longer belong solely to whatever civilization created them. They belong to anyone with the curiosity to examine the evidence and the courage to ask what it means. 8 pathways into darkness. 8 helices carved through stone that remembers the age of dinosaurs. 8 invitations to descend into a realm where our assumptions about the past dissolve and something stranger waits to be understood. The descent has not yet begun in physical terms. No human has climbed down into those shafts or walked across the floors of those chambers, but the descent has begun in conceptual terms. We are falling already, dropping through layers of certainty that once seemed solid, approaching depths where the light of conventional knowledge fails, and new illumination becomes necessary. And at the bottom of that fall, in cubic rooms larger than cathedrals, the answers wait in darkness. The Gran Sasso Proof. In science, the most beautiful theory can be destroyed by a single ugly fact. Conversely, the most outlandish claim can be elevated to serious consideration by a single compelling validation. When Filippo Biondi turned his satellite imaging technology toward the pyramids of Giza, he knew that his findings would be dismissed as fantasy unless he could demonstrate that his methodology actually worked. So he looked for a test case. He needed a location where large underground structures existed, where their dimensions were precisely known, where no ambiguity remained about what lay beneath the surface. He needed a place where his technique could either prove itself or fail spectacularly, with no room for excuse or equivocation. He found it in the mountains of central Italy. The Gran Sasso National Laboratory is the largest underground physics laboratory in the world. It sits deep within the Gran Sasso d'Italia, a massive limestone mountain in the Apennine Range, approximately 125 miles from Rome. The laboratory was constructed in the 1980s to provide a shielded environment for experiments that require protection from cosmic radiation. When particles from deep space strike the Earth's atmosphere, they create showers of secondary radiation that penetrate most buildings with ease. But a kilometre of solid rock blocks nearly all of this radiation, making deep underground facilities ideal for sensitive physics experiments. The main experimental halls at Gran Sasso measure 100 metres long, 20 metres wide, and 18 metres high. There are 3 of them, running parallel to each other like the fingers of a giant buried hand. Connecting tunnels and smaller chambers add to the complex. The total underground volume exceeds approximately 180,000 cubic metres. Every dimension has been surveyed, every corner has been mapped, every metre of the facility exists in engineering drawings and construction records. This is the target Biondi chose for his blind test. The logic was simple. If his SR Doppler tomography technique could accurately detect and characterise the Gran Sasso laboratory from orbit through more than a kilometre of mountain rock, then the technique was real. If it failed, if it showed structures where none existed or failed to show structures that were definitely there, then his claims about Giza would carry no weight. We did measurements of the Gran Sasso d'Italia Physics Laboratory, Biondi explained in his interview with Jesse Michaels. Our measurements and the reality match 100%. 100%. Not approximately. Not within reasonable margins. 100%. This is an extraordinary claim, and it deserves careful examination. What exactly did the satellite data show? How was the comparison made? What do we mean when we say that measurements match reality? The Gran Sasso Laboratory was built along the route of a highway tunnel that passes through the mountain. The tunnel itself is about 10 kilometres long, connecting the towns of L'Aquila and Teramo on opposite sides of the massif. The physics laboratories branch off from this main tunnel, carved into the rock beside it. The depth of rock overburden varies throughout the facility, but reaches approximately 1,400 metres at the deepest points. This depth is significant. 1,400 metres is similar to the depths that Biondi claims for the structures beneath Giza. If his technique works at Gran Sasso, it should work at similar depths elsewhere. The physics of seismic wave propagation and surface micro-movement detection does not change because you are in Italy instead of Egypt. Rock is rock. Vibrations are vibrations. The mathematics that reveals one hidden chamber should reveal another. Biondi processed satellite radar data collected over the Gran Sasso region using the same algorithms and techniques he later applied to Giza. The satellites were not told what to look for. The processing did not assume anything about what structures might exist. The data was analysed blind, in the scientific sense of that term, meaning that the analysis proceeded without reference to the known answer. And when the results emerged, they showed the 3 experimental halls exactly where they should be. The dimensions matched, the positions matched, the orientations matched. The technique had looked through a kilometre of mountain and seen what human engineers had built there decades earlier. This is the knockout punch that Biondi delivers to his critics. When skeptics like Zahi Hawass dismiss the Giza findings as impossible, when they insist that no radar technology can image structures at such depths, they must now explain how the same technology accurately mapped Gran Sasso. Was that also impossible? Was that also fake news? Did 4 satellite systems simultaneously hallucinate the existence of a physics laboratory that anyone can visit and verify with their own eyes? The Gran Sasso validation creates what philosophers of science call a transfer of credibility. If a method works in one case where we can check the results, we have reason to trust it in other cases where checking is more difficult. This is how all scientific instruments earn their authority. We calibrate them against known standards. We test them in controlled conditions. We demonstrate that they produce accurate results when accuracy can be verified. And then we deploy them in unknown territory with confidence that they will continue to work. Biondi's technique has been calibrated against Gran Sasso. It has been tested against a known standard. It has demonstrated accuracy when accuracy could be verified. This does not prove that the Giza findings are correct, but it shifts the burden of proof dramatically. It is no longer sufficient to simply assert that such deep imaging is impossible. It has been shown to be possible. The impossibility claim has been refuted by experimental demonstration. The implications extend beyond the specific question of what lies beneath the pyramids. If SAR Doppler tomography can reliably image structures at kilometre depths, the technique has applications throughout archaeology, geology, mining, and civil engineering. Imagine being able to map underground aquifers without drilling test wells. Imagine detecting tunnels beneath borders without physical inspection. Imagine surveying potential mining sites from orbit before committing to expensive ground operations. The technology that may reveal ancient secrets beneath Egypt could also transform how we understand the hidden world beneath all our feet. But let us remain focused on Giza, because the Gran Sasso validation makes the Egyptian findings far more consequential than they would be otherwise. Without that validation, Beyondi's claims would be interesting speculation, worthy of discussion but not of urgent attention. With that validation, the claims become a scientific puzzle that demands resolution. Consider what the data actually shows. 8 vertical shafts with helical internal structure, descending from the base of the Khafra pyramid to depths exceeding 1,000 meters. 2 cubic chambers measuring approximately 80 meters on each side at the convergence point of those shafts. Similar structures detected beneath the Menkaure pyramid, beneath the Sphinx, and at the distant site of Hawara. If these structures exist, they represent engineering on a scale we have never associated with ancient Egypt. They represent knowledge we have never credited to ancient builders. They represent a chapter of history that has been entirely lost, or suppressed, or simply invisible to every generation since the structures were sealed. If these structures do not exist, if the satellite data is somehow wrong despite its validation at Gran Sasso, then we face a different kind of puzzle. How did 4 independent satellite systems all produce the same false positive? How did the processing algorithms create geometric patterns that look precisely engineered if they correspond to nothing real? How did the Gran Sasso test succeed while the Giza analysis failed? The more parsimonious explanation, the one that requires fewer unlikely coincidences, is that the structures are real. The Gran Sasso proof establishes that the methodology works. The replication across 4 satellite systems establishes that the findings are not artifacts of a single instrument. The geometric precision of the detected structures establishes that they are not natural formations. The depth and scale establish that they are not consistent with any known ancient Egyptian construction. Every pillar of skepticism has been addressed. The technique is validated, the data is replicated, the geology is incompatible with natural explanations. What remains is the uncomfortable conclusion that we have been wrong about Giza for a very long time. This is not a comfortable conclusion for the academic establishment. Careers have been built on the existing narrative. Textbooks have been written. Museum exhibits have been designed. Doctoral theses have been defended. An entire field of Egyptology has organized itself around certain assumptions about what ancient Egyptians could and could not do. The structures beneath Giza, if they exist, do not fit those assumptions. They suggest capabilities that orthodox history denies. They imply knowledge that orthodox scholarship has not acknowledged. When paradigms shift in science, they rarely do so gracefully. The defenders of the old paradigm do not simply admit they were wrong and welcome the new understanding. They fight. They dismiss. They attack the credentials of those who challenge them. They demand impossible standards of proof while accepting flimsy evidence for their own positions. They invoke authority and tradition and consensus as if these were substitutes for data. We have seen this pattern before. We saw it when continental drift was proposed and geologists insisted that continents could not move. We saw it when bacteria were suggested as the cause of ulcers and physicians insisted that stress and diet were responsible. We saw it when younger researchers challenged established theories in field after field and were mocked until their evidence became undeniable. Beyondai faces this pattern now. His technology works, his data is consistent, his validation is public and reproducible, and yet the establishment response has been dismissal rather than investigation. Zahi Hawass declared the findings fake news within days of their announcement, without conducting any independent analysis, without examining the Gran Sasso validation, without engaging with the methodology at all. This is not how science is supposed to work. Science is supposed to follow evidence wherever it leads. Science is supposed to test claims against reality and update beliefs accordingly. Science is supposed to celebrate discoveries that challenge existing understanding because such discoveries expand human knowledge. But science is conducted by scientists, and scientists are human. They have egos and careers and comfortable assumptions they prefer not to question. They have colleagues whose approval they seek and institutions whose norms they follow. The sociology of science often diverges from its philosophy. What should happen in theory frequently fails to happen in practice. The Gran Sasso proof will not convince everyone. Some will continue to insist that the Giza findings are impossible regardless of what validations are offered. Some will demand physical excavation before they accept anything, knowing that such excavation is unlikely to be approved by Egyptian authorities who have already declared the research baseless. But the proof exists. The technique works. The data shows what it shows. And every day that passes without serious investigation is a day when one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in human history sits beneath the sand, unseen and unexplored, while those with the power to authorize exploration refuse to look. The mountains of Italy have given us a key. That key unlocks a door we did not know existed. What lies behind that door may reshape everything we think we know about our past. We need only the courage to walk through. The gatekeepers and the heretics, within days of Biondi's findings becoming public, Zahi Hawass responded. The former Egyptian Minister of Antiquities, perhaps the most famous Egyptologist in the world, did not request the data for analysis. He did not commission independent testing of the methodology. He did not express cautious interest while awaiting further evidence. He simply declared the discovery to be fake news. All this information is completely wrong and has no scientific basis, Hawass announced. The Ministry of Tourism and Antiquity did not give permission to any individuals or institutions to work inside or outside the Second Pyramid. This response reveals something important about how establishment archaeology approaches challenges to its authority. Note what Hawass did not say. He did not say that he had examined the satellite data and found it wanting. He did not say that he had consulted with radar engineers and determined that the methodology was flawed. He did not say that he had alternative evidence suggesting the structures do not exist. Instead, he said that permission was not given, as if the existence of underground structures depends on whether Egyptian bureaucrats approved the research, as if satellites orbiting hundreds of kilometers above the Earth require permits to collect data, as if reality itself conforms to administrative preferences. The claim about using radar inside the pyramid is false, Hawass continued, and the techniques employed are neither scientifically approved nor validated. But Biondi did not use radar inside the pyramid. His entire methodology is based on measuring surface vibrations from orbit, not penetrating structures with ground-based equipment. Either Hawass misunderstood the technique fundamentally, or he deliberately mischaracterized it to make dismissal easier. Neither possibility reflects well on his role as a scientific gatekeeper. The phrase scientifically approved is particularly revealing. Approved by whom? Science does not have a central approval authority that blesses certain techniques and forbids others. Science has a process of testing, replication, and peer review that establishes which techniques work and which do not. Biondi's technique has been tested against known underground structures and has succeeded. That is the scientific approval that matters. That is the validation that establishes credibility. But Hawass wields a different kind of authority. For decades, he has controlled access to the most significant archaeological sites in Egypt. Researchers who wish to excavate at Giza, who wish to conduct scans inside the pyramids, who wish to explore the passages beneath the Sphinx, must obtain his approval or the approval of his successors who share his views. This is not scientific authority. This is political authority. It does not derive from being right. It derives from controlling access. The sociology of Egyptology as a field cannot be separated from the politics of Egypt as a nation. The pyramids are not merely archaeological curiosities. They are national symbols. They are tourist attractions that generate billions of dollars in revenue. They are sources of pride for a country that has often struggled to find its place in the modern world. The narrative that Egyptians built these monuments, that they represent the genius of an indigenous civilization, that they are the heritage of the Egyptian people, is deeply important to national identity. Challenges to this narrative, regardless of their scientific merit, encounter resistance that has little to do with evidence and everything to do with politics. The suggestion that ancient Egyptians might not have built the visible pyramids, or that the visible pyramids might be merely the surface expression of something built by someone else, threatens the story that Egypt tells itself about its past. Zahi Hawass has positioned himself as the defender of that story. He has built a career on asserting Egyptian ownership of ancient Egyptian achievements. He has attacked researchers who suggest alternative construction methods, earlier dating, or non-Egyptian influence. He has used his administrative power to deny access to those whose findings might complicate the orthodox narrative. This is not unique to Egyptology. Every academic field has its gatekeepers, its orthodoxies, its mechanisms for suppressing heterodox ideas. What makes Egyptology unusual is the combination of scientific questions with nationalist politics, creating a situation where challenging a theory about ancient construction becomes equivalent to insulting an entire nation. The researchers whose findings are heretical pay a price for their heresy. They are denied access to the sites they wish to study. They are excluded from mainstream journals and conferences. Their credentials are questioned regardless of their qualifications. Their motivations are impugned regardless of their sincerity. Biondi faces this now. Despite his position at a respected university, despite his peer-reviewed publications, despite his validated methodology, he is being treated as a crank rather than a scientist. The evidence he has gathered is being dismissed without examination. The technique he developed is being mischaracterized as impossible, despite its demonstrated success. The whole history of science is the history of heretical thinking moving science forward, Jesse Meisels observed during the interview. Scientific paradigm shifts occur when there is a build-up of anomalies, and then the dam breaks. This insight from the philosophy of science, associated primarily with Thomas Kuhn's work on scientific revolutions, describes how fields actually change. Normal science proceeds within an accepted framework, solving puzzles that the framework defines. But anomalies accumulate. Findings that do not fit the framework pile up. For a while, they are dismissed as errors, or set aside as problems for future research. But eventually, the weight of anomalies becomes too great. A new framework emerges that accounts for what the old framework could not explain, and the field shifts often suddenly from the old paradigm to the new. We may be approaching such a shift in our understanding of ancient Egypt. The structures beneath Giza are not the only anomaly. The precision of the Great Pyramid's construction exceeds what conventional tools should have allowed. The alignment with true north is accurate to a fraction of a degree,